And on Thursday, the former Conservative UK Cabinet Minister, Michael Gove, will be formally introduced in the House of Lords as Lord Gove of Torry, taking his title from the Aberdeen suburb. Lord Gove spent 20 years as the MP for Surrey Heath, stepping down in June last year. He was a leading advocate of Brexit and a strong opponent of Scottish independence. But as you may have heard earlier in the programme, Lord Goves said there could be a second independence referendum if the public show overwhelming desire for one, though he added he didn't think independence was currently on the agenda, despite the First Minister John Swinney saying last week that he wanted to achieve demonstrable support for independence. Well, Lord Gove made his comments in an extended interview with our political correspondent, David Wallace-Lockhart.
Michael, thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us. I can call you Michael Gove now, but soon enough it'll be Lord Gove of Torry. Where does the Torry connection come from? Just remind people.
I was born and brought up in Aberdeen, and Torry in particular matters because that's where my dad was born. It's also where my parents got married and where I was baptised in St Fittick's Church. My dad's business, he ran a fish processing business, which was set up by my grandfather in Torry, closed when I was a teenager, or was taken over when I was a teenager. So from every point of view, Torry is Gove family, heritage, territory.
How do you assess the current state of the Union? When you were in government, you were very involved with the devolved governments. How strong is it at the moment? Because there'd be plenty of people who would think Scottish independence is still very much on the agenda at the moment.
I do believe it is, but I don't think for a moment that anyone should assume any degree of complacency about the Union. The Union is a living thing. It is not an historical artefact. And every day, politicians and society generally has to work, if we believe that we're better together, in order to demonstrate that.
Do you think there'll be a second independence referendum?
I don't believe that it's necessary at the moment. I think if there's an overwhelming desire on the part of the Scottish people for one, then we'd have to review the situation then.
How do you define overwhelming desire?
It's not for me. Ultimately, it's for the government, the Westminster government, to decide that they've got the daily responsibilities. But my own view is that, and it's long been my view, that a focus on the Constitution and constitutional issues is bad for almost every political party.
When you were in government, there were formal requests for that second independence referendum. They did come from a Holyrood Parliament that had a majority of pro-independence MSPs. Were you always comfortable with that message of now's not the time? Did you ever feel like there was an element of an anti-democratic message there?
No, I didn't think it was anti-democratic. I think it was the case that with the referendum in 2014, people had made the point that it was a decision that was there for a generation. But more than that, as I've argued, there are urgent questions that need to be addressed, urgent questions about the economic regeneration of the whole country, and urgent questions about improving public services in Scotland that, to me, are more important than some of these constitutional questions.
When you were in government, part of your role was often sort of liaise with the devolved governments. How did you find that relationship? Was it strained? Was it in a good place, particularly with regards to the SNP government in Scotland?
So much in the relationship depended on individuals. So there were some people in the Scottish government, Fergus Ewing, Kate Forbes, who I would disagree with on lots of issues, not least the Constitution, but who were very businesslike, who wanted to make progress and get things done. To be fair, I should also add that John Swinney, the current First Minister, was very much in that role. In the SNP team, you know, you've got strikers, but you've also got talented midfielders, and those talented midfielders were the people who did the work in order to ensure that the relationship was pragmatic and could work in everyone's interests.
Where did Nicola Sturgeon fit into this football formation?
Nicola was the enigmatic manager on the side.
Shortly before the EU referendum, 2016, you were on Good Morning Scotland and you said it would be for Scotland to decide immigration numbers after Brexit. Now, that hasn't happened.
No.
And I suppose a two-pronged question here. One, why didn't it happen? And two, sitting here now with the UK government saying that they want to cut down immigration, the Scottish government saying they're comfortable with immigration. Is that something that should be looked at now?
No, I don't think so. It was the case, and I was reflecting a position I think Jack McConnell took when he was First Minister, someone else I admire, that there was some flex in the system, in the existing UK system, but it's for the UK government to decide on migration policy overall. It's an integral part when you have a state like the United Kingdom, like any state, that control over who stays here and how they come here should be vested in one government.
As someone who's now watching politics a bit more from the outside,
yes,
are you surprised at how desperate the Conservative Party's position looks at the moment when the threat of reform is taken into account?
No, I think if you've been in politics for a wee while, which I have, you know that the opinion poll numbers in between elections can fluctuate. Within a few years, you will see the party under someone like Ruth Davidson as, you know, the dominant and rising force, the principal opposition in Scotland.
Russell Finlay's got less than a year now until that Holyrood election. Is it time to panic if you're potentially polling at fourth?
No, don't panic. If you're a fan of Aberdeen Football Club, you know that sometimes you'll have a very good run, sometimes you'll have a very difficult run, but in the end, you might end up in the top two. So, come the Scottish Cup final. So, the important thing to do is not to change the manager, but to stick together as a team and to show the fighting spirit necessary to battle through.
But ultimately, Aberdeen could end up trophyless this season.
Well, they had a much more difficult patch a few months ago.
You were very early on a champion of Kemi Badenoch.
Absolutely.
Has she lived up to your expectations? She doesn't seem to be having the best time as leader of the opposition at the moment.
I don't think anyone who was elected after the defeat that we had last year would have found it easy, and Kemi's been very, very clear. This was the basis on which he won the leadership, that it would take time to rebuild.
A final topic. We had a very big Supreme Court judgment lately on the definition of a woman. It didn't stem from this piece of legislation, but much of the debate in Scotland began with the Gender Recognition Reform Act in the Scottish Parliament. That was blocked by the UK government using Section 35 of the Scotland Act, first time that had ever been used. Were you involved in that decision? Were you in the room when that was discussed? How big a deal was that to use that power for the first time?
Yes, I was the chair of the Cabinet subcommittee that took the decision. I think it was absolutely the right decision, and I think it's been vindicated by subsequent events, defending women's rights and defending the principle that biological sex is the basis on which you decide who is a man and who is a woman. I think that was absolutely the right thing to do.
Take us to that meeting. Was there any unease about this decision? Because obviously it was a massive constitutional moment, essentially striking down a piece of legislation that the Scottish Parliament had passed. Essentially a reminder to people in Scotland that the UK government ultimately could veto legislation.
It's there in the Scotland Act, Section 35, because at the time that devolution was legislated for, it was clear that there might need to be a fail-safe power in order to ensure that the overall rights of everyone in the United Kingdom could be protected.
And should that power be used sparingly, however, that's Section 35?
Oh, absolutely. It must be used sparingly.
Michael Gove, thank you very much for speaking to us.
Thank you.